Hello, my name is Sean Jackson. I'm the founder of Resgrid. Resgrid is an open source computer-aided dispatch solution that you can install on Windows, Linux, and Docker installations. Today we're going to be going over installing it in a Windows Server and Sql Server 2019 installation. To get started, for this video, you're going to want to have a fresh Windows Server 2019 standard installation, appropriate license, and Sql Server 2019 standard and appropriate license. Everything else we're going to be able to download and install live. So let's go ahead and get started. You can see here I have basically a fresh install of Windows Server 2019 standard. One of the first things that we're going to want to do is open up a web browser, go to GitHub, and you're going to want to go to /resgrid/core, which is the main application that you'll be installing on this computer. Resgrid core contains the UI, so the website itself that you're logging into, your dispatchers are using, your personnel are using. It also contains the API website that the applications themselves are using to communicate with the backend system and the database. So if you're using the Resgrid Responder application, Resgrid Unit app for AVL and that kind of stuff, the Dispatcher app or the Big Board, those things all use that API website, which needs to be independently accessed as well. The other parts of this system are backend workers used for schedule events and operations, and then live event processing. So inbound dispatches, user submits a status, reports generated, that kind of stuff. So you go to the GitHub, and then we're going to go ahead and scroll down, and we're going to look at the documentation. We're going to use this to kind of guide the installation that I'm going to do here. So this documentation is going to get you to the point where you have a locally running version of Resgrid that you can log into, play around with, start to configure, but it doesn't get you into a state where it is externally accessible. You're going to need an IT professional to set that up, because you're going to need to configure firewalls properly for security. You're going to need to have DNS entries, static IP addresses, servers, that are responsible for serving that up in a way that can be accessible within your organization or over the internet if you're trying to stitch together people that won't be logging in the same network. So this is going to be kind of the step one, basically just installing the software on the server. There are many more steps to ensure that it is working and accessible through an internet or through your broader network. Additionally, there's a lot of ongoing maintenance you're going to have to do on the server itself, on Sql Server, and then updating the installation, backing things up, and ensuring that you have high availability. We're going to be installing this on one server, but depending on your organizational needs, you may have to have this Resgrid system spread across many servers to handle the load. A single server, decently powerful, one with maybe 16 gig of RAM could service 25 to 50, maybe 100 concurrent users using the website and then the applications. You start scaling that up to hundreds and thousands of users, you're going to have multiple servers interacting with each other, handling the load balancing, and all those other kind of stuff. So this isn't a simple system that you can just kind of get up, fire, and forget. It's going to need to be configured, maintained, and then properly scaled depending on your usage scenarios. So we're going to go down here to the prerequisites and dependencies, and there's a couple things that we need to install. First, you need to make sure you have in this tutorial, you need to have a version of Windows Server 2019 standard. You'll need to have a version of Microsoft SQL Server 2019 standard. You can get that from a Microsoft authorized retailer. So you'll need to get that and a license, and then we'll go over the installation of that as well. In here, you'll need to download .NET Core 3.1. So if you go ahead and click that link, that'll bring you to this page right here. So I'm going to want to download the x64 Windows installer for the SDK. And then because we're running this on Windows and IIS, you're going to need to install the hosting bundle. for this as well. So you'll need to make sure that you install, download and install that. We'll go over that. Erlang is required for Rabbitmq. Rabbitmq is a backend message store messaging provider that Resgrid uses for async communications. It is required. So you'll want to go to that link, and you'll want to download the OTP24 Windows binary file. And then for Rabbitmq, you go down here. I'm just going to go ahead and click on one of these updates. So 3.8.19. It's going to direct me to their GitHub page. So I'll go ahead and click through that. This is a pre-release. Highly don't recommend installing that on a production server. So I've got to scroll down. So here's the 3.8.19 release. And you want to go down to the assets, and then you're going to want the server for Windows.zip. So you want to download this one. It's 25 meg. The one below it is just a verification file for signing. And then you'll need a version of Redis. So in here, we'll download the latest version. It's not going to be the right one. So check the downloads page. So we're also going to need a version of Redis to run on the system. Redis does not natively run on Windows, so if, clicking these downloads. tar.gz is a Linux Unix kind of installer, so there's going to have to be a different path we're going to take to install this once we get in here. And then there's SQL Server and IS that need to be installed. So you'll be responsible for acquiring SQL Server 2019 Standard, and then we're going to go ahead and install IS right now. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. I'm going to open up the server manager and clicking on local server, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a role and feature. So we're going to do role-based feature installation, current server. And then I'm going to go down here, I'm going to select the web server, and then I'm going to be adding these as well. Go ahead, I'm going to click next. And then we can go ahead and install these. So you want .NET 4.7, WCF, HTTP activation is good, and then accepting the prompts, and then ASP.NET 4.7 as well. Click next, next. Common HTTP features, we're going to want HTTP redirection. We're okay with the health and diagnostics. We'll want dynamic compression. Then I recommend basic authentication, IP and domain restrictions, and URL authorization. And then you do not need the FTP server. So I'm going to go ahead and click next and install. All right, so our IIS installation succeeded, and we are good to go here. So I can go ahead and click close, and you should see a IIS server tab now. And you should be able to click into that, and then that works. If you go over here to Tools, you should see the IIS Manager. And click into that, and you should be able to see all this. This is a good indication that your IIS server installation worked correctly. So we'll go ahead and we'll minimize that stuff. And going back into your downloads, so where you downloaded .NET Core and everything like that from our original documentation, we're going to go ahead and get that installed. So we're going to start with the .NET SDK 3.1.4.10 Windows x64 installation. So I'm going to go ahead and double click that. All right, so .NET Core 3.1 has been installed. We're going to go ahead and install the hosting module for IIS. So this allows .NET Core to be hosted and run through our IIS server we just installed. And it looks like the hosting module has completed installation as well. So let us go back here. So what have we done so far? We've installed Microsoft IAS on the server, and then we've installed .NET Core 3.1 and the hosting module. Both are required. .NET Core 3.1 SDK and the .NET Core 3.1 hosting module from this page are both required as well to get that up and running. So next, let's go ahead and install Erlang. It should be this OTP Win64 executable. And I'm going to go ahead and install C++ as well, as it's required for the Erlang installation. All right, Erlang has been installed. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to work on Rabbitmq next. So what I'm going to start doing is just extracting the Rabbitmq installer. All right, Rabbitmq has finished extracting, so this is what it looks like. And I do apologize. We actually don't need the zip. We're going to need the Rabbitmq executable, because that contains the installer. Let's see. Let's go to get started. Download and installation. Let's make sure we get the right one this time. All right, so got the get started, download and installing. Scrolling down, Windows, chocolatey or installer recommended. We downloaded the binary build. That's a little bit more difficult to set up. So we're going to install using the official installer. And if we scroll down on this page, we can see here there's the appropriate download. So it's the .exe, not the .zip. All right, that finished. So we're going to go ahead and open that up and then run it. I'm actually going to cancel out of that. Sometimes they will ask for elevated permissions, the UAC prompt. Other times they won't. So it's just safe to right-click, run as administrator. There we go. So we want to accept the defaults and just let that install. All right, installation there has finished, and we can go ahead and close on that. So next, we're going to have to install the management console for Rabbitmq. So we should be good there. Running as a service. So we're going to take a look at this right now. So we'll go back to Server Manager, go to Tools, go to Services, and go ahead and click Standard. I'm going to press R, and then we see Rabbitmq is running a startup type as automatic. That's required because if this service isn't running, Rabbitmq isn't running on the back end, and then that means that it won't be there to service requests that Resgrid is going to be trying to submit to it. Let's see. What we're going to want to do next is install the management console. So So the management plugin. I just find it's easier to bounce out to Google, type it in, and get back in, so I'm trying to go around in the website. All right, so down here, this is what we need. So the Rabbitmq plugins enabled, and then the Rabbitmq management. So we're going to go ahead and, not sure if they installed a command prompt. There we go. So I accessed that through the start menu. So the Rabbitmq command prompt with that one. So we should be able to type in Rabbitmq. Just do help, just make sure it works. Okay, there we go. So that is a valid command, so we're good to go there. So now what we actually want to do is we want to type in this command right here. So Rabbitmq plugins. Go ahead and hit enter. You can see it's enabling the plugin, and this should be your server name. All right, it finished installing and starting up the plugins, which is perfect. So now the next thing that we need to do is we need to access it via the website. So they give you the URL right here. So I'm just go ahead and hit copy. And then so that worked. You can see the Rabbitmq interface. And you can see everything that it can provide there. I believe the login by default is guest. Let's see if that works. Yes, it did. All right. So guest username, guest is the password that allowed us to log in. And this allows us to configure what we need for Resgrid. So if we go back to our installation document for Resgrid core, and then we've just enabled the management UI. We've installed Erlang. We have not received that prompt, and we might not. That's okay. So once we have it installed and set up, so far it is, and we're in the admin console, we're going to need to create the following user. So Resgrid, and then Resgrid ! is a password. For production installation, I highly recommend you do not use these default username and passwords. Please have a strong username and have a very strong password that you're using for all these logins and service accounts. This is just to kind of get you in there and get something configured. This should be always changed as part of a hardening pass before you open it up to your broader network or the internet. So I'll go here, back to the Rabbitmq console running on localhost. All users, so we can go ahead and we can add a user. So our username is going to be Resgrid. Password, ! And then we'll go back to our installation documents. Default users. All right, so that looks good. So we'll go ahead and we'll add the user. So we see here, it's been added. Jumping back, we're going to need to edit our virtual host next and give the user permissions. You can see here it doesn't have access to anything. So I think okay, so still on the admin page we click on the user at this point in time, user doesn't have any permissions, so here we got to add the permissions. So we're going to want to make sure that that permission is set there. And then for the topic permissions, we're also setting that permissions. So at this point in time, if we go back, we can see that can access virtual host. It's got the slash there. Okay, so for right now, Rabbitmq is installed and configured. So we can just tab over to the overview and we can go ahead and leave that right there. So let's go back to our installation. So now we have Rabbitmq and then Erlang installed and configured thus far. We're going to go ahead and skip Redis for right now. It's slightly complicated, so we'll get to that in a bit. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get Sql Server installed. So I'm just going to go ahead and double click that to mount it, and I'm going to go ahead and double click the setup. All right, that finished loading. So we go over here, click installation, and then install SQL Server Standalone or add features. So go ahead and click that. All right, so that's going to load up. We're going to go ahead, enter in your product key. You'll have to accept the license terms. So you may or may not receive a warning here. In my case, I wasn't able to connect to the Windows Update service to download a product update. You may have one where you can install an update on the installer. I usually choose not to. I try to go through the basic installer and then I'll download the update separately and then apply it. Sometimes that can just mess with the installation. Or hang it up. So I usually skip this anyways. Right now I don't have a choice because I wasn't able to download the update. So I can just click next and then get right through this. Right now it's just going to download, or not download, but extract the installation files used for the rest of the setup. All right, that finally finished. It quite a while for me. So the install rules section will pop up right now. A lot of this is fine. You'll have to make sure that if you have any of these that are X's, you're going to have to fix those before you can install SQL Server on that box. If you have the warning sign, you're usually fine to proceed. All right, so now we're in feature selection. You're going to need the database engine service. I usually like the client tools connectivity. Let's see. Integration services. And you do not need analysis or anything else to get the system working. Default installation locations are fine. Older versions of SQL Server will also have the SQL Server Management Console. Here is an option that you can select. Have it. I always keep looking for it. We have to download that separately from the website to get the management console. We're going to want the default instance. If you have multiple SQL servers running the same box, you can. The other ones have to be named, but leave this as default. Leave the instance ID the same. And then hopefully this will be decently quick. All right, that screen finally progressed. So we can leave this configuration as it is. If you want to do scheduled backups and all that other kind of stuff, the agent will probably run that, so you'll want to change that to automatic. Collation is also important. Just make sure that yours is set as the CP1 CIAS. Go ahead and hit next. All right, so I usually set mine up as mixed mode, so I have a SA password. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click Add the Current User as the Windows mixed part of this mixed mode authentication, so I can make sure I can get there. I'm going to specify a SQL Server password. It's going to have to be decently strong. Hopefully I got that in twice correct. Data directories, leave all those the same. TempDB, you can leave that configured the same. All these just leave as the default. We don't use file stream right now. We did in the past, so we can kind of leave this unchecked. We'll be moving to a different system for that in the future. So that's configured. Go ahead, click next. So it's going to test the configuration rules. Now we're ready to install. So I'm going to go ahead and click the install button, and we're going to go ahead and let this guy plug away. All right, with that, SQL Server has installed. So we close out of that. Next we're going to need is the Sql Management Tools. Like I said earlier, that's going to be a separate download. So we'll go ahead and we'll click that link. Really don't want to deal with that, so I'm just going to open this up in Firefox. All right, so we'll want to download SQL Server Management Studio. Let's save it. All right, that has downloaded. So it's going to be the SSMS setup ENU. We can go ahead and close out of that. So leave the default location, go ahead and click install. All right, SQL Server Management Studio has been installed. Go ahead and close that up. So now let's go ahead and open it. So go to our start menu. Let's see, I think it's under SQL Server Tools 18 and then Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to connect to our default SQL Server instance that we just installed, just to make sure everything there is operational. And we're going to need to configure some stuff in there as well once we got that up and running. All right, so Management Studio is open. I'm going to connect to the default instance, and you can do with Windows authentication for your locally logged in user or SQL authentication, and it's the username is SA and it's the password that you supplied during the installation. I'm just going to go ahead and do Windows authentication. And then we are connected, so I can open that up. And then we have no user databases, so there's nothing to be here. But I can expand this and I can see the system databases. So that's perfect. That means our SQL Server is operational and ready to rock. Open this back up. So we'll go back to our installation document and we have SQL Server all configured. So the last real thing that we have to get configured for the minimal operational aspects of the system is Redis. So running on Windows Server 2019, we're going to have to use the WSL system, the Windows subsystem for Linux, to be able to get that operational. So we go down here You can see in the Redis documentation there is how to install WSL2 on Windows Server 2019. And we're just going to follow this guide here. So now we're going to have to open up PowerShell. So Windows PowerShell, I'm going to right-click, run as administrator. And that should open up Windows PowerShell with the administrator prefix. And then I'm going to copy and paste this entire command. And this operation may take quite a while. It's actually doing what we were doing, the add remove features, when we were installing IIS, but it's just doing this through the command line. So it can take quite a while depending on your system. Right here, that was actually pretty quick. It's a pleasant surprise. Then we're going to go here, copy and paste, execute this next one. Right, that one worked as well. I'm going to go ahead and run this command. We might have to do the reboot, but we'll just give this a shot first. Restart required, possible. So we're going to go ahead and do a restart and then come back to this. All right, I just finished a reboot for good measure. So next step, we have to download our Linux distro. This will install Ubuntu 18.04, which is perfect. And then this will take quite a little bit of time. All right, so the download is complete. We're going to go ahead and run our next command. And we're going to run this one. Okay, looks like that succeeded as well. So looks like we just need to cd into directory, and then we're going to run this command. So we see here, this is the exe that we wanted to execute. So we went ahead and run that. And that looks like this is what they have here on their command line. And just go ahead and let this run. All right, now that we're here, we need to specify a Unix username. And a password. All right, so now you can see we got this green prompt, username at server name. We're in Linux right now. So going back to the guide, we're going to want to sudo apt update. And it's going to make me enter my password. It's the one we just entered up above. And this will fetch all the latest packages for the apt updater. All right, packages finished updating. So now we actually need to do the upgrade. So the previous one was updating. This one is upgrading. If you do the sudo commands quick enough, you won't have to enter your password again. We're just going to go ahead and click yes. And this is going to upgrade all of our packages that we have currently installed to the latest. While that box is being updated, we're going to go ahead and run the second command. So I'm going to open up a new PowerShell instance. And then we're going to go ahead and run this one. Oh, looks like that is not valid anymore. Check. Yep, I guess we don't need to set version 2 anymore, so we can disregard this. We'll run this other command just to verify though. So we've got that up and running. So that looks good. We can go ahead and close that. So I think we are good with this documentation. And I'm just going to go ahead and let this finish running. It does take quite a while, depending on the speed of your system. During your update, you may get a prompt like this. Just go ahead and answer yes. So you can restart the services that are needed, especially since it's a new install. No other users or other processes are going to be using those services, so they're pretty good to just go ahead and let that installer restart them. All right, looks like the upgrade completed, so all done there. Next thing we got to do is we got to install Redis server on there, so you can take a look at this article. It's also linked. Just copy and paste that link in here. So we did the update, we did the upgrade. So next thing we need to do is install the Redis server. Yes. And this will be the command we use to verify that it installed correctly, and then we'll want to make sure the server is actually running. And installation finished. We'll go ahead, run this. Good. So this is installed, and we're going to go ahead and give it server a restart. Just make sure it is working correctly. Stopping and starting. So we're good to go there. So going back to our installation documentation. Let's go back up to the top. Redis was kind of the last thing that we needed installed here. Elk is required So it's Elastic, Logstash, and Kibana. That's required if you want local aggregation of the system logs. So Resgrid can kind of emit those to a location that Elk can ingest them, so you have a single place to kind of search for logs and everything like that. Right now, we're going to skip that part of the installation because it is optional, but it is required if you're trying to debug the instance or installation, other issues that could be arriving. So you'll want to look up documentation to set up Elastic Elk on your instance and then start ingesting the Resgrid logs into that so you have a single place to be able to analyze those as they come out. So all that stuff is done. So we can go ahead and turn that off. So the next thing that we need to do is we actually need to download the Resgrid source. So I'm going to go back up here to core. And if you scroll down, you'll want to click the releases tab, and you'll want to nab the current release. Right now we only have pre-releases, but once we get to the point where we're out of the pre-release schedule, you want to download the non-pre-release version of the code, if at all possible. Right now it's not possible because we only have pre-release versions. So we want to go down to Assets, and you want to download this zip. So we can scroll down here. We've done Redis, we've installed WebAdmin, given permissions. Rabbitmq, we've installed Redis. We're going to skip Elastic Elk for now, but they have all the installations here you can follow. We've installed Microsoft IIS and .NET Core and Hosting Bundle. So now we're into the install Resgrid portion right here. So I have it downloaded already. I'm just going to go ahead and move that over to the desktop. And I'm going to extract it. Depending on how fast your system is, this could be pretty quick or pretty slow. So we're just going to come back once it finishes. While this is extracting, what we're going to go ahead and do is go back to the documentation. There is a SQL Server section that we walked through kind of earlier. And there is the database creation. So what I'm going to want to do first, though, is I'm going to go to Security, I'm going to go to Logins. I'm going to type in a new login. And this one we'll call Resgrid app. And go ahead and create. And then we're going to want to create two databases. We have a Resgrid database and a Resgrid workers database that needs to be created. We just created the user here. So we're going to go ahead and create the two databases. So the first one is the main Resgrid database. So we'll go here to Databases, New Database. And we should need to do everything here. Do that all the same. And go ahead and create. All right, looks like that too. Perfect. All right, and then we need another database. Resgrid workers. Both of those are defined here. So Resgrid, and then the Resgrid workers database. The next thing we'll need to do is we need to assign permissions for that user. So go here, Resgrid app, properties, user mapping, and then Resgrid, DB owner, Resgrid workers, DB owner. Okay. So now we've got those things created, so we're good to go there. Obviously, for the username and password for this, you're going to want to pick a different username and a different password for a production installation as part of your hardening before go live. Okay, so actually I'll open this back up. And we're going to go scroll up here. So installing Resgrid, so we've unzipped the folder. So that's right here. I'm going to open that up. And then I'm going to see these folders here. So following the documentation, we need to create a folder at the root of C. So go here, C drive, new folder. That. And move all these over. Should be relatively quick. Okay, next thing we need to do is we need to set up the host file. So I need to run Notepad as administrator. So Notepad, run as administrator. File open. C drive, Windows. System 32. Drivers at C, and then all files. So the host file, add a couple lines, and we're just going to want to copy these. There we go. Okay, so you want to make sure you save it. Okay, and we're good to go there. So database installation, we've installed SQL Server, we've created the database, we've created the user. So now we need to make sure our network configuration is correct. Okay, so we're going to open up the SQL Server Configuration Manager. Now this one says 19. If you install a different version of SQL, it'll be whatever that version is. So, like I said, documentation. We need to check our SQL Server network configuration and protocols. So SQL Server network configuration protocols. TCP/IP is enabled. Shared memory is enabled. So we are good to go there. All right, so now we need to open up a command prompt. Oop, not the Rabbitmq one, just a regular one. So we're going to Resgrid. And then we're going to go to Tools. So C drive Resgrid Tools, and then we're going to run this command. So here, opening up this database here, tables. So there's no tables currently, it's an empty database. Oh, and we got an error. Let's see what we got. Login failed. So, what happened? Well, let's check the user. So, Resgrid app. Let's go down here. Resgrid app. That is correct. I'm going to go ahead and make sure my password's correct. And then I need to make sure that the user mapping is correct. Default schema, DBO, Resgrid, DBR, Resgrid, DBR. That looks good. What I'm also going to do is C drive Resgrid. I'm going to go to the config folder. So this is where we're going to have to make any kind of configuration changes for the system. Just to make sure it runs correctly. You can open this up in Notepad. And then data connection string. So it's connecting to this server, which we've added a host file entry for down here. Okay. And then connecting to the database app, and then the password's correct. So all that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and rerun the command. Hopefully get a different result. Perfect. So you can see it's doing the migrations. I'm going to go back up to tables, refresh. And you see now we have tables in our database, which is perfect. So we've done our database migration. Okay, so now we need to create a Windows user. So I'm going to go here to Computer Management Tools, and then there should be Computer Management. I'm used to seeing a users and groups option there. So Computer Management, and then local users and groups. And we are creating a user. Okay. Oh, so we have a password policy we need to conform to. Let's see if that works. It does not. Oop. All right, there we go. Got one I liked. So, got that user created. You don't have to check the user cannot change password. It's sometimes a good measure just make sure nobody goes in there and reconfigures it on you. So now what we have to do is grant it full control rights to the folder. So C drive, Resgrid, properties, security, edit, add. Okay, so there, that's good. Control, apply. Sounds good. I usually like going into advanced and then replace as well. Okay. Perfect. So now we're on the IIS installation step. So tools, our server manager, tools, IIS manager. Go down here. Sites, and then we are going to do add website. You see here, this is the information that we are going to select. So we're going to name this one Resgrid physical path. So this is going to be the site that you're going to interact with, that you're going to log into. So C drive, Resgrid, web. Select that. We're going to need an SSL certificate for this as well. So this is the domain name that we're going to want. So for SSL, you need to have certificates installed on here. The site and the API will not work if you're not doing it over a secure internet connection. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually cancel out of this. And I'm going to do a self-signed certificate for right now. That does not work in any kind of production scenario. So, here, server certificates, right-click, create self-signed cert. We'll call this one local. And we're going to make another one local. And for web hosting, okay. So we'll go back here, website. Web. HTTPS. Okay, we're going to set our self-signed certificate. We're also going to specify our connect as. Now go ahead and test. Both of these need to be green check marks. If they're not, make sure go back and reset the user permissions to make sure that that Windows user that you're using has full control to those folders. Okay, so we got that one. So we already did our connect as, and now we're going to create the API. Goes down here, Resgrid API, same thing, HTTPS, and then for this one, Resgrid API.local, so same thing. We're going to do connect as, same user. Test settings, both green, and create. Yes, that's fine. Yes. Okay. Might have missed the binding on that one, unfortunately. So we're over here to bindings. I didn't specify the host name, which is why I got that error message. So we need to make sure you specify the host names because both of these sites are being served from the same server. They're basically sharing a port. The IIS web server is going to determine which of these two sites to launch. So we need to make sure that's correct. So resgrid.local on 443 for the website, Resgrid API local on 443 for that one. Okay, so we are good to go there. We want to make sure our application pools are also good and started. So Resgrid API started before integrated. Perfect. All right, so now that that is all configured, I should be able to log in. You're going to get this error message because it's a self-signed cert. So click advanced, accept and continue. We're also going to test out the API. API.local. Same thing. Because of this and other compatibility reasons, this is why you cannot use self-signed certs to communicate with either the external applications or additional providers trying to communicate with it. So the API, this is the application programming interface that the applications use. So you should see this website load up. And you can see here we have our login page that loaded up. So we're going to go ahead, oops, go back. We're going to log in with our credentials. Admin, and then password. Both the default credentials are here, and obviously you can change those once you have that bit completed. There's single white. This could be speed. There we go. So that was getting the Resgrid core installation installed on a Windows Server 2019 with a SQL Server 2019 database. We got the website, as you can see here, and the API websites, both operational. At this point in time, you could create calls, add some personnel, test some functionality out to see how it works and get things configured. Afterwards, there's going to need to be additional steps taken to get the system fully operational. You're going to need to configure the workers to ensure that that is running, excuse me, as an operational, as a command line task, so that is processing kind of backend information. Then obviously you're going to need to configure the system for broader use. So to run the workers, we're just going to go ahead and get this running right now. Oh, sorry. Keep opening that one by default. I want to go ahead, command prompt, and then oops. Workers. And in here, there's going to be a workers.console.exe. And you should just need to pass in the run parameter for that. It'll continue to load up the configuration, and everything in here uses the same master configuration to get going. And you can see here, these are the workers that are starting to run. You need to leave this window operational because that will process things as they're going through. So you can have this as a startup task for Windows to just have this run in the background. So that will enable the website to process requests for you. So now you have the website, both the website and the API running on IIS. You have the worker application that is running right here, and you want to leave that kind of operational, ensure that it's running. We can go ahead and close out of the tools because we've already installed our databases. Running this worker application is going to hydrate this workers database. So if we open this up, you'll see that the schedule and the work tables are in there. All right, so that was getting everything up and running. Obviously, if you run into issues or have questions, you can go to our GitHub and open up an issue, or you can join our Discord and try and ask questions there if you need additional help. Thank you.